So I want to start by taking you back on a journey to 1955. Looking around, a few of you might remember 1955. The rest of you will have to imagine it with me. So it's a time when the country's just still recovering from war. Food rationing had actually only ended the year before. Churchill was still Prime Minister. He was 80 and in declining health, but he was still Prime Minister at the start of the year. But it was also quite a time of change, I would say. The sounds of rock and roll were starting to reach the UK from America. Commercial TV, ITV was about to launch, breaking the BBC's monopoly. And Heathrow Airport was building its first permanent passenger terminal. So a step up from a collection of ex-military tents in the field. But here at NPL, this man, Louis Essen, was about to change the way we measured time forever. And basically it was that year, working with his colleague Jack Parry, who you see on the left in that photo, they built the first working cesium atomic clock here at NPL. But to understand why that was such a radical development, we need to go further back in time and look at what came before. And basically, humans have been measuring time for centuries, to regulate various aspects of our daily lives. And any form of timekeeping, any form of clock relies on something that oscillates or moves in a periodic way, rotates. So in the earliest times, timekeeping was based on the motion of astronomical bodies across the sky, so the sun or the stars. And from the point of view of an observer on the Earth, it looks like those move in a periodic way. So every day the sun passes overhead at approximately the same time. So in the early times, it would have been sticks in the ground or stones that were used as they cast a shadow that moved over the course of the day as the sun moved across the sky. Of course, we know now this is due to the rotation of the Earth, but people didn't know at that time. And later, these clocks would have evolved into the more formal sundial. But of course, these were only good in daylight. So as timekeeping evolved, people came up with other ways of keeping time in the dark or on cloudy days. So there were various forms of clock developed, so water clocks, candle clocks, hourglasses, and then a big advance, I'd say, were pendulum clocks. So a pendulum, just like anything else, relies on something that oscillates, right? And that's great, but it's very hard to make a pendulum or two pendulum clocks that tick at exactly the same rate. So I change the length of the string and it goes faster. Make it longer again, it goes slower. So that's the drawback of these clocks. It depends exactly on the construction of the clock that you've built. And that means you need a reference against which to calibrate your pendulum clock. And that reference was the rotation of the Earth. So our definition of time at this point in history would have been one period of rotation of the Earth is equal to 1 day or 86,400 seconds. That's how we define the second. Of course, the pendulum gives us the advantage of higher resolution in our timing measurements because it oscillates so much faster than the Earth is rotating. So it gives us the possibility to measure seconds or even fractions of a second. But as timekeeping and technology evolved, timekeeping got better. So pendulum clocks gradually got replaced by quartz clocks. Again, the quartz crystals oscillate at much higher frequencies than the pendulum in a pendulum clock. And so again, this splits time up into smaller pieces and gives us better resolution in the time measurement. Again, quartz crystals are also typically more accurate because they're less sensitive to environmental effects like temperature that can change the frequency at which the crystal oscillates. But still, no two crystals are exactly the same. And so you can't build two crystals that tick at exactly the same rate. And so you still need the reference, which is the rotation of the Earth still at this point. And that's a problem because it turned out that as our ability to measure time improved, we could see that the period of the Earth's rotation was not, in fact, constant. The Earth's period of rotation on its axis is gradually slowing down because of tidal friction, and it also fluctuates in unpredictable ways, which is even worse. So, say an earthquake or a tsunami can make small but detectable changes in the rate at which it's rotating. So this doesn't feel like a very good thing to base your standard of measurement on, right? Because it's changing. So we come back to Essen and his first cesium atomic clock. And this is really the heart of what made his clock so much better. So he is using cesium atoms to measure time. So I want to take a quick look at how that works. Basically, we take a source of microwaves and we adjust the frequency of those microwaves till they hit the exact frequency at which a cesium atom absorbs the radiation. And cesium atoms really do absorb at a very, very specific frequency that's a little bit bigger than 9 billion times per second. But the really key point here is not only the high frequency, which gives us, again, better timing resolution. The key point is that every cesium atom is identical. So anybody can take their collection of cesium atoms and they'll tune their microwave source into resonance with those cesium atoms, and everybody will agree on what that frequency is because all the atoms are the same. So that was really the big advance with Essen's clock. What is interesting is he clearly realized that it wasn't enough to just have a great new clock in his lab. He also had to tell the authorities at NPL about it. So this is a quote from his memoirs, written later, of course, but he said, "We invited the director to come and witness the death of this astronomical second and the birth of atomic time." And this is absolutely correct. It was the birth of atomic time at this point. 12 years later, after a lot of discussions, this group of men from around the globe came together in Paris, and they decided that the time had come to redefine the second in the international system of units. We moved away from the astronomical second to a definition based on atoms. So the second, from then on, still the case today, is the duration of 9,192,631,770 periods of the oscillation of the radiation corresponding to the transition between the two hyperfine levels of the ground state of the cesium-133 atom. So this very specific absorption frequency. And so we just count that number of oscillations, and that's what a second is. Of course, some of you are probably sitting there thinking, 9,192,631,770? Really? Why? Wouldn't it have been better to just pick 9 billion or even 10 billion? Well, okay, the story behind that number is you can't just, if we had picked one of these other numbers, we'd have changed the length of the second. We have to make the new definition of the unit consistent with the old one based on astronomical time. So Essen had to measure the frequency of his fantastic new clock relative to the rotation of the Earth, and actually then relative to some intermediate definition of the second that I don't really want to go into because it was a retrograde step. And so what that meant is he had to collaborate with observatories who realised astronomical timescales. So the Royal Observatory in Greenwich and the United States Naval Observatory. And it was basically the results of their measurement of the frequency of Essen's clock against astronomical timescales that gave that number that appears in the definition of the second. So that's why it's such a weird number. It's just what it was. So the story doesn't end there. Essen's clock had an accuracy of 10 microseconds per day. That's pretty good, probably most of you are thinking. But today that makes it a museum piece. And you can go and see this clock. You can find it in the Science Museum in South Kensington. It's in the Making the Modern World gallery if you want to go and take a look. Today, On the right there, you see our current UK primary standard of frequency, our cesium fountain primary frequency standard. This clock is almost 1 million times more accurate than Essen's clock. So things have moved along a lot in the last 70 years. And the big difference really between these two clocks, it's maybe a bit more complicated, but the principles are exactly the same as Essen's. The difference is that in Essen's clock, the atoms were hot, and in this clock, they're really, really cold. We cool them down using lasers to temperatures a few thousandths of a degree above absolute zero. And basically, atoms that jiggle around more, their frequency doesn't shift around so much due to the effect known as the Doppler shift, which is basically the same thing as when you get an ambulance going past you, you hear its siren pitch change as it moves relative to you. So the colder the atoms, the less they move around and the less their frequency gets affected by the motion. So that's what basically gives this clock its accuracy. And some of you are probably thinking, why on earth do I care about clocks that are 1 million times better than Essen's clock? Surely that was good enough. And I would argue that you should all care, because you all rely on atomic clocks every day, whether or not you realise that you're relying on these clocks. So systems like the mobile phones, the internet, these rely on atomic clocks because we have to accurately synchronise all the switches, route and traffic data around the networks, and if they all aren't synchronised, you'll end up with packets going here, there and everywhere, and all the messages will get garbled at the far end. Timing is very important for auditing of financial transactions. It's important for synchronizing the phase of energy entering the power grid from different sources. It's an inherent part of satellite navigation systems. You use clocks all the time, satellites orbiting the Earth, to pinpoint your location on Earth if you're using the sat-nav. So it's very, very important to modern life, and we have come to rely on the accuracy of atomic clocks in our daily lives. But the story still doesn't end there, because we're still building better clocks. And these are our next generation timekeepers at NPL. These are the clocks of the future. They're optical clocks. And again, you're probably starting to see a common theme here. Optical frequencies absorbed by atoms. Different types of atoms this time. They're strontium and ytterbium, but sort of doesn't matter. The principles are the same. The only difference is that the frequencies are much, much higher because it's absorption of laser light rather than microwaves. So 100,000 times higher in frequency. So again, we're splitting time into smaller pieces. We get better accuracy. And these clocks are roughly about 100 times better now than our best primary standard. And that is leading us to questions about, is it now time to redefine the second again in the international system of units? And there's a lot of discussions going on about this at the moment. But these clocks are so accurate, in fact, that they're not going to measure time anymore. They're going to measure gravity. Because Einstein told us that the rate at which a clock ticks depends on the gravity potential that it experiences. So a clock at the bottom of a mountain ticks more slowly compared to a clock at the top of a mountain. That's quite easy to remember because lower is slower. Or alternatively, you can explain away your grey hair by saying that your head is aging faster than your feet. It's not a very big change, though. It's only about a few nanoseconds per year. So maybe that won't convince everybody. But the point here is that the optical clocks are sensitive to being moved just 1 centimetre in height at the Earth's surface. So this is like amazing precision that the clocks will enable. And this is why I'm saying they become gravity sensors after a point, not time measurement anymore. So that's it, a very, very quick whiz through the history of a clock that changed time. You've seen NPL was the birthplace of atomic timekeeping. We're still at the forefront of atomic timekeeping today. So thank you for listening.